Welcome along, ladies and gents, to a very special Friday morning version of the Football Insomniac. I'm delighted to be joined today by Clyde One Super Scoreboard's Alison Conroy. Alison, we had a few technical issues, but we're here now. How are you doing?
We got there eventually. I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm doing not bad. It's Friday. It's the weekend. We've got a feast of football to look forward to coming up. And in the last it's now 9 days since we've been on. There's been a lot that's happened. Neil Lennon has departed Celtic. There's now plans for fans to get back into the stadiums down south. We've had a round of European football. Rangers have cruised through to the last 16. It's been a fantastic week, hasn't it?
It's been absolutely brilliant. There's so much going on in football at the moment, and every day brings something different for us, and I'm absolutely loving it. The highs, the lows, there's so much to cover, and as you say, a little bit of excitement. Maybe there'll be some fans at some point, but I'm not getting too carried away by that at the moment.
I think the biggest thing for me is hopefully there'll be fans in for the European Championships, especially this will be the first one that I'll ever remember.
I remember a few.
I was too young for 98. I remember bits of it, but I'd be desperate to see Scotland doing well this summer. I'm sure everybody would.
Mexico 86 is the first one I remember.
I never asked you to show your age, Alison. Come on. But if you are watching on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, leave your comments. If you get any questions for Alison, put them in the comments section and we'll bring them up later on. We're also only 8 subscribers away from 10,000 on YouTube. It's been an incredible growth. Let's try and get there during this broadcast. Tell your friends, get them to subscribe to A State of Mind on YouTube. Let's see if we can get the 10k during the broadcast. I know the team are looking in the background, so if it does happen, we're going to bring it up on screen. It'll be fantastic, hopefully. And Mr. Briggs, who always joins us, says, loves a bit of the Football Insomniac show, Colin, always a highlight of every week. Well, let's take a look back at the highlights of this week. Today we're going to be discussing the impact of social media on footballers, the abuse that they've received over the last week or so, where it's overstepped the line, and what can social media companies do to stop that. Lower league football looks as if it's going to be making a return alongside the women's game. What is the plans for this going forward? We're going to discuss a bit of Ewan Robertson's post. He's a previous guest of the Football Insomniac that suggests that the lower league season could be back with an 18-game season followed by a split, which is an interesting one. Alison is going to let us know who would be at her dream football dinner party and what she would be cooking. I don't know if I said to you that you'd need to tell me what you're cooking. So you
didn't tell me that, so now I'm like,
You've got a bit of time to think about that. And then we're also going to take a look through Alison's career and just why Super Scoreboard is so popular and how it's managed to last the length of time it has. But first, let's take a look at the story that is emerging in Scottish football, and that is the return of the lower leagues. Now, I believe it's been since, was it Boxing Day was the last game? And you are a Forfar fan, so you've been without a team to support now for the best part of 2.5 months. Ewan Robertson in the Daily Record the other day said that the JRG got that one right, is looking at potentially having an 18-game season followed by a split with 4 more games. So you would play 2 home and 2 away and then into the playoffs. The question is, Alison, do you think that we will see the return, or is this just another step towards probably null and void in the League 1 and League 2 this season?
I hope we see football back. I fear for a lot of clubs if we don't see football back in some way. I mean, you look at Forfar, they played 10 games this season. We've got 6 points as well, so we'll gloss over that one. But 10 games in a season, there's been no football, and yet for clubs like Forfar and whatever, from the players' point of view, they're part-time, so it's not as big an impact. But you look at your Partick Thistles, your Falkirks, that's livelihoods, and they're big clubs that have already taken a hit because of what happened last season. Particularly Partick Thistle, then going down a league, then they've had the season stopped, they've got no football, they're still full-time. They need football back in some way. I'm not convinced of this setup of, cutting the season even more. Part of me thinks, could you play into the summer for a little bit longer to try and play more games? And I think probably the clubs would prefer that, but I think we're now at the stage that we need to have football back in some way for them, because I fear for a lot of clubs' futures. Yes, they got grants, have been given some money, but you look at League One, League Two, they were given $1.5 million, so that works about 150 grand a club. When you think of what your overheads are for simply just running the club, when you've not got fans coming in as well, that money's gone so quickly that and it would be so sad to see clubs go to the wall not simply, that's kind of making light of it, but because of something that's out with their control as well. And there's only, they've been given support, but that support can't be unlimited either. And players just want to play football, let's be honest. They want to get on the pitch and play football.
Yeah, and that's what fans want as well.
Yeah.
Even fans of your lower league teams, all they want to do is see their team at the weekend. I mean, obviously, you're a Forfar fan, so it's been now, 2 months since Forfar last played. Yeah. And despite the fact they're sitting towards the bottom of the table, you'd still be looking forward to the weekend going, right, we can turn this round. I want to see what the guys can do. And it's just that option's not there. You don't want to have to then kind of pacify yourself with going, there's the English Premier League, I'll just watch that. You want to see your own team play.
Particularly when they're sitting bottom of the table, you want to think, right, let's play and get some points. And all these clubs as well have put so many things in place so fans can watch the games, and that's another expense that they've then had to put in place so fans can watch it. And now there's nothing for them to watch, so it's soul destroying for it. I feel for fans as much as players at the moment as well, because you're not getting to go and watch your teams. And yes, I'm in a lucky, privileged position in a sense that I get to go and watch football every week. Still, with no, don't get me wrong, watching football with no fans, I don't want it to continue any longer than it has to, because it's like watching training games.
What's that been like this season? Because obviously you've covered games for Clyde 1, you've been to Celtic Park, you've been to Ibrox, you've been all over. It must be such an eerie atmosphere when you get into the grounds.
It's so strange. It's just, as I say, it's kind of like, it's got that kind of training game feel about it, because there are no fans. And, as much as players feed off the crowd, we as journalists feed off the crowd as well, and you kind of get your emotions through the game from that as well. And, you look at different grounds are doing it in different ways as well. So Celtic Park, they pipe in crowd noise actually just in the stadium, so you've got some sort of crowd noise, but quite a lot of grounds, there's nothing. So you're only hearing what's on the pitch. And don't get me wrong, it's quite entertaining at times, the things that you hear that you wouldn't hear if the stadiums were full. So you hear what the managers are saying, what the players are saying to each other, and that's quite entertaining in some ways. But if you look at covering big games, European nights and things, and there's no fans there, none of us want that. Football's entertainment.
Yeah, it's what you pay your money for. It's why you go to the games. So, I mean, it must be even more difficult when you go to the grounds where it is all you have as the fans. Games like Forfar versus Clyde or Dumbarton v Falkirk, it's a small crowd, but you hear every shout from the fans, and the players hear it as well, and it must be so strange. But I mean, so as you were saying, I think Forfar have played 10 games. I'm just looking at the League One table here. Yeah. You're 3 points behind Clyde, who have only played 8 games. That just shows how irregular these games are being played. And when the leagues were suspended at the point that they were, the question was, can they bring in things like regular testing so that they can get the games to go ahead? Now, that proposal came forward in January and was knocked back. And that's understandable considering the position that the country found itself in. But now as we're improving as a country, is that potentially the route back for these lower league teams, that they would have to go through a sort of rigorous testing procedure? And how do these clubs end up affording something like that?
Well, that's the problem. I mean, the clubs have offered to pay for that, but it is a big outlay when they're not bringing the money in. But I think that is the only way that essentially at the moment they can probably bring football back in some way. And I know it's very difficult when you look at League One and League Two, and most of these players are part-time, they've got other jobs, so it's not as easy as keeping them in a bubble in a sense that you're doing in the Premier League, in the Premiership, in the Championship. But there are tests now, and if you look at the amount of different places that have brought in testing now as well, schools, and even at Clyde, everyone that goes into Clyde, into the studios, are tested twice a week with the lateral flow tests at home. Obviously, if that then flags up, you would then go and get your NHS test as well. But there's so many more places are now testing routinely because it's something that we've got to bring in to keep everybody safe. And I think if clubs can foot the bill for that and can bring that in, I think it would be a way of bringing football back. Because as you say, Forfar played 10 games, Clyde have played 8 because Clyde had that outbreak and they had to cancel a few games because of that. And it is more difficult when it's part-time players and they are mixing if they're going to work or whatever. You can't stop players going to work so they can play football on a Saturday. That's not feasible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. That's the problem, is because these players aren't full-time. So it's like they're maybe training twice a week, they're playing on a Wednesday, and then I'm not having a go at anybody here, but they may go in and work in Tesco at the weekend. They're dealing with so many members of the public. If you catch it, you can spread it so quickly. So you can understand the reasons why it was called off. But then as a kind of lower league fan, you're thinking, I just missed the fact that you can have that. I mean, was it Elgin City were able to bring in something like 400 or 500 fans just only a couple of weeks before this was cancelled, and then it's back to absolute nothing. There's a question just coming in here or a statement coming in from Paul CFC, a Celtic fan, saying, not saying Celtic would have done better this season with fans, but it must have made some players feel like they were playing training matches. And that's a point that you just made there. I think some of the performances from players have missed that encouragement from the fans, have missed even fans getting on your back, because I think if you get that criticism, it strives you to play even better. So,
I think that some players have performed better because there's been no fans, because they're not maybe getting criticism that they would have got before, whereas other players haven't performed to the level that they would have because they're not getting, I suppose, the backing and the praise from the fans. So I think it's worked for different players, it's worked in different ways. Some players maybe have improved and other players have maybe taken a step back. It's a strange thing, but yeah, definitely with no fans it's affected performances.
And I was reading a thing on Twitter the other day, I think it was Dave McDonald from Pye and Bovril, was saying basically that after the last league game in Scotland, which I think is the 17th of March, the 24th of March, something around about that, there's a break of 3 or 4 weeks before the first post-split game is played. So we're going to have a winter break, but in the springtime. Surely that is a period where we have to move the games forward, take the split, move it forward, and then potentially when the weather looks as if it's going to be good in sort of late April, early May, let's try and get the Scottish Cup played, because at the minute I can't see a way for that to be played out between now and the end of the season. Yeah,
that's the issue. I mean, the Scottish Cup's already, 2 rounds behind where it should be, but we need to get the lower league clubs back playing football before we can then play that. And then you then feel for the lower league clubs in that sense as well, because if they do play the Scottish Cup, you're bringing in lower league teams who dream of the giant killings, they dream of making an impact against a bigger club. If they've not been playing any football, it then makes that even more difficult for them to have any chance of that giant killing that they all dream of and want to get as far as they can in the Cup. But I'm the same as you. The longer it goes, I can't see where the Scottish Cup is going to be played. And then you've got the issue, though, you've got sponsors, you've got TV rights. These companies aren't just going to say, well, just don't play it this season. They're going to want money back, or they're going to want it played. So there's got to be a way whether you do push it into the summer, but then you've got the Euros and you've got players from certain clubs going to play in the Euros, and they don't want to miss the Euros, but the clubs want to have their players there for the Scottish Cup. So it's so difficult. I
always thought that potentially if they were going to bring back the lower leagues, they could almost play through the European Championships. I know UEFA don't really like that idea of other leagues still being going on, but I think the Irish League will still be playing. And when there's no Celtic, Rangers, Motherwell, Hearts, any of the bigger teams playing, perhaps eyes will turn to the lower leagues and you'll see more people watching the Forfar games because, well, the Scotland game isn't until 6 o'clock tonight, but the Forfar game kicks off at 3. I'll try and watch that one first before I go and watch the Scotland game. I always thought that was a better idea to get the eyes on the league, but it does look as if they're going to try and curtail it so that Hampden is available for the European Championships in June. So if that's the case, I think you have to bring the post-split games forward and let's get this sort of Scottish Cup mini-tournament played in the last sort of 3-4 weeks.
I think a mini-tournament would be absolutely brilliant. You were talking about it the other day. I think a kind of 3-week festival of football mini-tournament. I think it would be something different, something quite entertaining because everything's played in a short space of time.
And Forfar are still in the Scottish Cup. Who have you got in the next round?
My mind has just gone absolutely blank. That's terrible. That's awful. Awful.
All the Forfar fans are like, I knew she wasn't a Forfar fan. She
They're all raging at me now. Oh, absolutely raging at me.
But, I mean, I'm looking at the League One table and there's 10 teams in the league. 8 of them are still in the Scottish Cup. You look at League Two, there's still a couple of those teams in the Scottish Cup as well. You're right, we've got to get the lower leagues back before we can even consider that. And one of the other talking points is the Highland League and the Lowland League. Now, when I took a look at their league tables, I think the Highland League have only played 3 games. They've got a 15-game schedule. The Lowland League have managed to get a bit more than that, and they've played 13 games. But last season, there was such an uproar because the pyramid system was almost scrapped last year. There was no team getting relegated from League Two. There was no one coming up to replace them. Can we do that 2 years in a row? Is that fair for the Scottish game?
I don't think it is. There's so many clubs fighting for their survival, to develop, to make that step up, and they're going to feel like that. Yes, thank you, Anthony. They're going to feel that they're going to miss out more and more because, there's clubs that lost out last season because decisions had to be made, something had to be done, and it was unprecedented. It was a pandemic. We didn't know what we were dealing with. But these clubs aren't going to settle for losing out again and again because of something out with their control. And I don't think they should because, clubs are playing for this, they're fighting for this, and you can't just say, well, you're going to lose out again.
And the amount of teams in the Lowland League, especially, that are putting so much money in. You take a look at who's top of the Lowland League, Celtic Hearts, managed by Barry Ferguson. The players that they've got in there, they're spending a vast amount of money to try and get into the pyramid system, into the lower leagues.
East Kilbride another one.
Yeah, they're not going to accept 2 years in a row having spent that money and having no return back from it. I think it was it Kelty and Brora that was supposed to be the playoff last year, and it gets cancelled. I don't think they will stand for that. But then, if you look at it, if the Highland League doesn't get going, is 3 games enough to decide a champion? You'd probably suggest that would be null and void. So it's such an awkward position that we find ourselves in right now. And I think the ones that are praying that this doesn't go ahead is Beacon City fans sitting bottom of League Two once again with only 4 points.
Escape again.
They've had the full Mark Wilson treatment and they're sitting bottom of the table. What was that like when Mark was coming in and obviously his team wasn't doing well?
He took it in good part. He did take it in good part because, as you can imagine, particularly Gordon Dalziel did not miss him every single week. He'd dug him up about it every week. And then remember when he got sacked, he was then in the studio the following Saturday and Beacon won a game. And he got absolutely caned for that as well. But, he took it in good part and he got to a point there was nothing. I suppose he'd run out of ideas for Beacon and realised that his time was up, and he looks at it now and probably thinks, well, they're still bottom of the league, so I couldn't have done anything else.
And Gordon Dalziel and Mark Wilson is something we're going to talk about later on, because they actually were one of my highlights of the first lockdown and the Thursday night quiz. So we'll bring that up when we talk about Super Scoreboard later on. But just to kind of wrap this section up, what do you think will happen? We've obviously seen the plans that are on the table. Will we see a return of the lower league football? Will Forfar beat the drop? And when will we see this potentially kick back in again?
Well, obviously, hope that Forfar beat the drop. I think if they stopped the season now, it would have to be a null and void. I don't think 8, 9, 10 games is enough, quite frankly, to decide who goes up and who goes down. I would like to think that lower league football will come back in some way. As you say, restrictions hopefully will be eased at some point soon. And I think if clubs are willing to pay for the testing, that we can bring it in some way, probably a shorter season. And I do think will be the way forward. But yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, we do get some lower league football, because there's too many fans missing it as well.
So we're thinking a 22-game season, that'll be enough. So we need 12 games, 12 wins for Forfar to get them off the bottom of the table. And Fraser Ogilvie just coming in here saying, for Alison, managed to see Jim Weir yesterday. He's looking good and hoping to get involved in football when things settle down.
Oh, that's good to hear. Jim was a great guy, actually. When so my son just turned 3 in January, and he was only a few months old. My dad's 70th birthday was coming up. Decided to get him some Forfar gin. But we had to drive to Forfar to get the gin because they didn't post it out. So it was a Saturday morning, drove up, and I took my wee boy to the ground. He was only months old. Walked in, Jim Weir was there, just handed him a baby, and he went away and showed him Station Park and got some photos. So yeah, my wee one was even up to see Jim when he was, I think he was about 4 months old, which is not even that, 3 months old. That was his first football ground he went to.
I just can't wait till he's a bit older and he says, "Oh, Mum, what was my first football experience?" And it was, "Well, Jim Weir showed you round Forfar."
So did around Station Park.
And I mean, it just shows the reach this show's getting. We've even got a Brecon fan in here saying "on the hedge," so it just shows this is for everyone. If you are watching, do leave us a comment. If you've got any questions for Alison, let me know. I see a couple coming in, and I'll save them for that segment. But again, so much to talk about in football this week. Even the Scotland women's team have had an impressive performance to talk about. 10-0 against Cyprus. Did you manage to catch any of the game?
I saw a little bit because it was on during the day as well where I was working, and I was like, there's another goal, there's another goal, there's another goal. And obviously there has been the changes. They were already out of the tournament, but it was about making an impact and trying to end in that. I know that it was in defeat in the following game, but what a performance. To score 10 goals is just phenomenal. Looking for a new manager to come in. Will Stewart get the job? There's a lot of changes, but he certainly did himself no harm leading a team to a 10-0 victory.
It was really impressive because it wasn't as if, I mean, I know Cyprus, their women's team aren't up to really any sort of standard, and if you get a lot of people that don't like women's football, they'll say, oh, well, this is just a prime example as to why. But some of the football that Scotland played was absolutely incredible. If anyone hasn't seen it, go and take a look at Caroline Weir's goal. If that was someone like Messi or Ronaldo scoring a goal like that, you would never hear the end of it. It was an outstanding bit of footwork and then a lovely finish. And as you said, it's all about planning for the future. Obviously, we had the experience of the women's team being at the World Cup last year, and what happened there. That was almost a prime way of how to summarise Scotland with the performances from the women's team. Just not quite getting there, getting so far and then falling at the last hurdle. But yeah, definitely something to look forward to for the women's game. Unfortunately, a 3-0, was it a 2-0 defeat? Sorry, to Portugal the other day. But yeah, a lot of kind of eyes on that for the future.
Getting a lot more coverage now and a lot more focus as well, which is it's good to see. Not just for Scotland, the women's team. You've got Glasgow City doing so well in Europe as well, and that's getting more recognition that it deserves as well, because these girls are doing something pretty impressive to get to a major tournament, to win 10-0, to do this. We can't just ignore it because people go, oh, well, it's, I don't want to watch the women's game. Start watching it. Yeah.
I mean, I've always kept a keen eye. I'm a Celtic fan, and I've always kept a keen eye on the Celtic women's team and seeing the development that's came through there. I mean, both Celtic and Rangers are now full-time teams. They are paying the players an actual wage, and I know it's at least the living wage. So these girls are making a career out of football now, which is something that we could never have dreamt of 5-10 years ago. And you just think, what's going to happen in the next 5-10 years? I was on the Celtic podcast a couple of days ago, and we're talking about potentially someone coming in between now and the rest of the season for Neil Lennon. If you look at the coaching experience of the Celtic women's manager, Fran Alonso, there's nothing to suggest that he wouldn't have been capable enough to come in and guide the team for a couple of games. That shows the calibre of managers that have been attracted to the women's game.
I mean, you look at Scott Booth at Glasgow City, for example, as well. He's been there a long time, and you look what he's achieved with Glasgow City, but he's never been tempted to go, do you know what, I'll maybe go and look at a job elsewhere, go back into the men's game, because he obviously recognises what he's achieving. And you look at their Champions League performances, their league performances, and the game's just growing and growing.
It's incredible. And you look at Glasgow City, I think they've made the last 16 or the last 8 of the Women's Champions Leagues over the last couple of years, losing only to eventual winners Lyon. It just shows you there is a future in the women's game, and that's part of the lower leagues coming back, is that we have to bring back the women's game as well. And I think the standard is slowly but surely improving. And
we've got some way to go competing with some other countries with women's football, but certainly we're making inroads, and we are stepping it up, thankfully.
Yeah, and it's getting a lot of coverage as well. You see it's all over BBC. A lot of the England games are now being shown on BBC One. I think there is a bright future in women's football, and actually it's something that I'd like to do on the Insomniac at some point. I'd love to have someone from Glasgow City or Rangers or Celtic on, just to kind of explain what the steps are going forward and how they think that they can manage to get that audience, because I think they could be one of the first to actually get fans back in, because you don't get a lot of fans at the games. So for the smaller crowds, potentially women's football might be an option for someone that hasn't been to a game.
It might attract them along. If you look at the final game before last summer in Jamaica at Hampden, and the crowd they got for that as well, it was a record crowd at Hampden for a Scotland women's game. I was there as well, and it was a great atmosphere. And
it's a lot more of a family atmosphere as well, isn't it? You kind of see a lot of parents bringing their kids and stuff along, but it must encourage a lot of young girls who want to take up football, that they can see people like Caroline Weir, like Jen Beattie, like Erin Cuthbert, players that they can aspire to be in the future. And it must do wonders for the young girls' game.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so different now to when I was a little girl. I mean, women's football just wasn't a thing, really. You could go and play football, but women's football wasn't as big as it is now, obviously.
Yeah, I remember even playing in kind of younger teams, and there was maybe the odd team that had a girl in their team, and then you sort of get to, I think, it's the age of like 11 or 12, and then it's like, well, you might be the best player in the team, but we have to cast you off because this is a boys' game. It's a shame. But, I mean, a result like that just shows how far Scotland have come, and I think for me it's a bright spark for the future and something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely.
So we've covered that, and we've covered the Lowland Leagues. Before we go on to the social media kind of scandals that we've seen over the last week, I'm going to take this opportunity for everyone just to put their comments in. If you're watching on Facebook, we've got quite a good live audience at the minute. Any questions for Alison, bring them in. We will be speaking to her later on about her career so far. And A State of Mind is just letting us know we're now only 5 subscribers short of 10,000. So if anyone's watching that isn't subscribed already, get that done. We want to see this. We want to get the big 10K whilst we're on the air. So definitely. Now, anytime I have a guest on, and some of the guests we've had in recent weeks has been some great standard, and it continues today with yourself, I always ask them about who they would have over for a dinner party. Now, being Scottish, we don't call it a dinner party. We call it a gaff, we call it an empty, we call it anything else. I was speaking with Anthony Joseph last week from Sky Sports, and he was saying basically since he's moved down to London, it's more dinner party-esque. You kind of dress up with the tuxedos, and but in Scotland it's still a gaff, it's still an empty. But we cover all genres here, so we'll just keep it to dinner party.
Right.
And the basis is you have 4 people from the world of football, dead or alive, because this is like Cinderella. We've managed to bring them back, but at 12 o'clock they go back into the original state, just like the carriage goes back into a pumpkin. And they're over in the Conroy household. First of all, what is on the dinner table? I've given you 28 minutes now. What are you going to do?
I know, I'm like, what would I actually make? I think what I would make. So I would probably, I think my starter would probably be a baked camembert. baked in the bread.
Nice. Yep.
With some rosemary, and you'll dip it in, bit of sharing and all that. I think my main would be a duck breast
nice.
and a nice plum sauce with some potatoes and veg. And dessert, that's a difficult one. Probably need to have a cheese board because everybody likes a cheese board. But then it's a bit cheesy because I've got my cheese already. A lot of cheese. So maybe I'm thinking maybe a pavlova, something nice and light at the end of the meal. Maybe pavlova.
I've got to say, you've put a lot of thought into that. A lot of people just say...
I love cooking, so yeah.
A lot of people go, I'll throw a couple of pizzas and I'll order a Domino's.
See, I'm having an actual dinner party. I'm actually going for it here.
The best one I've had was the old Morton social media manager, Ewan Boyle, who told me that he would make cheese toasties. So, I mean, from cheese toasties to a 3-course meal, the standard just continues to improve.
Oh, I'm having a proper dinner party, yeah. I'm going for it.
So anyone that's going to be a guest on the show coming forward now know they have to make a 3-course meal, and that standard's been set by Alison Conroy, so you can blame her going forward. But first, who would be the first one at the door with a bottle of wine?
The first one at the door with a bottle of wine, believe it or not, is Craig Brewster. He's coming in first. He is my Forfar legend. He is the player that I grew up watching. He was the first Forfar player I remember. Now, Craig Brewster knows this. Craig Brewster knows I idolise him. Every time I see him, I tell him. So he knows that he was my favourite player growing up. So I have to have Craig Brewster at my dinner party because, to me, he's an absolute legend.
Have you actually had a dinner with Craig before? What's he like when he's in your company?
He's a great guy. I had been at many dinners with Craig over the years. Actually, maybe last year, Gordon Dale was sitting beside me at a game and he's on the phone. Alison, there's somebody here to speak to you. And he gave me the phone. And I'm like, hello. No, I'm having a full conversation with this guy. And I'm going, no. And then eventually I was like, Craig Brewster on the phone. And he just handed him to it. So, he's a lovely guy. Really, really, really nice guy. Got a lot of time from him. I think he'd be a great dinner party. I think he'd be one of the sensible ones, though. He's not going to go for it full on party, but I've got a few others here that might, so we'll be all right. I was just
about to ask, does that mean that you've got the sensible one out the road and the rest are going to be party animals that's coming in next?
Oh, I'm mixing it up a bit. I'm inviting Jurgen Klopp because I think what a football manager, great stories, but also a really, really funny guy. So I think you want somebody with some good chat, good stories, bit of humour. So I think Jurgen would bring a lot of that to the party. So I think Jurgen would be a great dinner guest.
I mean, Jurgen Klopp, Craig Brewster. Where do we go next? I can't even predict who's going to be next through the door.
We're going to Dennis Law next.
Oh,
Dennis Law.
That is a bit of a change.
Yeah, because what a player. And he was the first, when I was a kind of young journalist, I did a press conference with Dennis Law, and he's the first guy that I remember. He walked into the room and I went, oh my God, that's Dennis Law. I was like kind of starstruck by him. Like, it was probably the first one that I remember of everybody. And then I interviewed, he was the first one walking in. I went, that's Dennis Law. Because what a player he was. You look at his career, just Manchester United, Scotland, everything. He was just a great, great player. And he's, again, a really great guy as well. And I think, again, the stories he could tell you from the past, you can imagine putting Dennis Law and Jurgen Klopp together and the stories that they could tell from the past, from now, from the style of football that's changed. I just think they would have some brilliant, brilliant stories to tell.
So, I mean, Craig Brewster, Jurgen Klopp, Dennis Law. We've got the camembert,
I'm laughing
and we've got the cheese board. I honestly don't know how this one finishes up. It's going to be a surprise. Who is the last one through the door?
I'm bringing John Lambie.
I mean, you'd need the bleep machine for a start, but what a guy John Lambie was.
Do you know what? You just think a dinner party, John Lambie, just the stories, the humour, just such a confident guy. I just think you throw him into the mix. Jurgen, Dennis, Craig, John Lambie.
incredible. I mean, see, when I watched the Partick Thistle documentary when I was younger, and I could barely hear a word they were saying just because everything got bleeped. But my favourite John Lambie story is I think everyone knows this story. It was when one of his players went down injured, and he says, he doesn't know where he is, John. He says, I'll just tell him he's Pelé and send him back on for the second half. Just how football has changed since then.
You just get away with half of it now, but heart in his sleeve, just a really great guy. And what a dinner party guest he would be.
And he's a massive loss to the Scottish game.
Absolutely.
We were discussing this a while back. We were trying to think, is there anyone that's got the sort of character of John Lambie? And I think the only person that maybe comes even slightly close to it must be Dick Campbell. Dick Campbell
would be probably of your... Dick Campbell, very similar. Maybe slightly toned down, only slightly though. Dick Campbell would be probably your last proper old school football character of that kind of generation, because I know Dick Campbell really well from when he was at Partick Thistle to Forfar. What a career he's had and the results that he gets. And I was absolutely gutted when he left Forfar, let's be honest, especially to go to Arbroath. Great guy. He almost made the cut, but I went John Lambie instead.
So just looking to see if anyone's put their comments for who they would have in. If you do have your dream football dinner party, do let us know. Mr. Briggs back in again. Rack my brain every week for something interesting regarding the dinner party question. Here is an explosive duo to get round and listen to. Patrick Vieira and Roy Keane. Imagine the scenes. All I can say is I really hope there's no pizza involved, just like there was the last time.
Yeah. But the combination at your dinner party, I don't think you'd want it in your house though.
Definitely. Charles Docherty coming in saying Jimmy Calderwood. I reckon he's probably one of those as well. Yeah. He is the one, along with Dick Campbell, John Lambie. Put the three of them together in the room, you wouldn't get a word in edgeways.
You just leave them for 3 days and they wouldn't stop talking.
And Fraser Ogilvie just coming in saying Dick Campbell, the Angus hero. I honestly think if anyone hasn't already, there should be a documentary done on Dick Campbell inside that dressing room at some point. You'd probably need that bleeper machine back there.
You would need it. Yeah. You would need to dust down the John Lambie bleep machine just for Dick Campbell.
You would just see the steam coming off it. It would be unreal. A State of Mind coming back in, letting us know we're only one subscriber away now. Come on, if you've not done it, get over to A State of Mind on YouTube. You could be our 10,000th subscriber. That was quite a difficult one to say. I don't know if you caught any of David Moyes' interview this morning, his pre-match press conference. Try and, if you get a chance, look at it and see him trying to say the word pandemic. It was brilliant. He slavered over it. It's going to be one that's on one of those blooper reels going forward. He eventually just said it was... He couldn't get the word pandemic out, so it became the COVID-y thing, which was even better.
Brilliant. The COVID-y thing. That didn't catch on. That COVID-y thing.
We're going to put that on a T-shirt, that COVID-y thing.
That COVID-y thing.
But brilliant. So at your dinner party with the 3-course meal, we have Craig Brewster, Jurgen Klopp, Dennis Law and John Lambie. That is definitely one. I think he'll do well to get a word in edgeways amongst all that. But John Lambie, Jurgen Klopp in the same room. He's the German.
Yeah, no. I don't know if Jurgen would understand him. Not sure if Jurgen would know what he was saying, but you never know.
I'm sure he would just laugh anyway. He just seems like that sort of infectious character.
Absolutely.
So yeah, get your comments in. We're going to move on to our next topic, and it is the abuse that some footballers have received on social media over the last sort of 2 to 3 weeks. It really started and it hit the main news, actually. It was on the 10 o'clock news that I first seen this. Swansea's Jan Danda receiving abuse through Instagram. He's basically one of very few British Asian players that play in the kind of big leagues. And the abuse that he's got has been ridiculous. Instagram took to making some changes, but all they managed to do was to block the person that sent the messages from sending them any more. They've allowed the guy to keep his Instagram account. And what does that tell footballers nowadays? That this abuse will go on. We'll stop it hitting you, but they can go and do it to anybody else. There has to be some change made across all this social media, because fans want to interact with their favourite players, but their favourite players don't need to be called every name under the sun for absolutely no reason. You wouldn't get away with it at a football ground. Why should you get away with it because you're behind a laptop like me and you are right now?
There's got to be a way that these companies can make it stop. You know, Twitter is probably the worst for it. It's now creeping into Instagram. You look at Florian Camberry last week as well, getting the abuse on Instagram. And players, they want to be on these platforms because they want to be able to interact with fans in some way, but it's going to drive them away from social media if they think, well, what's the point? I'm just going to be on here to get abuse. Now, I get abuse on social media as well, simply for doing my job. People treat me abuse because I say something that's true, but they might just not like it. So that, for some reason, means that they think it's perfectly acceptable to give me abuse. And I think, well, it's not. It's absolutely not. You wouldn't do it to somebody walking down the street. You wouldn't walk up to somebody in the street and say the things that they've said. I mean, some of the stuff they said, you can't repeat it, actually. Not that long ago, I called a guy out. Now, what he said, I can't remember what it was. It wasn't terrible, but I remember looking at his tweet, and in his profile picture was his daughter. And I replied and I said, and he private messaged me and said, oh, it was just a little joke, I didn't mean it. And I replied and I said, would you see it as a little joke if somebody had done that to your daughter? Oh, I'm sorry. And I think for a lot of the ones that are abusing it, and it doesn't make it any better, it's heat of the moment, I don't like that, I'm hitting out at you. That's not acceptable. And I don't see how these social media companies can do it. I was watching something on television the other day about Facebook, and they were essentially saying, well, we can't do it in terms of you need a passport to have an account, because a lot of people across the world don't have a passport. So do you discriminate against the ones that don't have a passport, saying that you can't have social media, even though they're not necessarily the ones that are going to abuse people? But I think accounts need to be shut down more often than just block. No, I can block people, which I have regularly done, because I don't want to read abuse continually coming at me because you simply don't like what I've said. And people as well on social media, they develop an opinion of you, and they think they know you, and they don't. In terms of that, Twitter's very much my work account. I'll tweet the odd kind of thing from my life on it, but in terms of my son, if I've got a photo of him, it'll be the back of his head. I would never put a photo of my son on Twitter for that reason, because there's so much abuse out there and poison at times that I think a lot of it's education as well, and kind of saying to people, how would you feel? Would you accept somebody saying that to you? We're going to the point that people are wishing somebody dead because they scored a goal against their team. I mean, wind your neck in. It's just, you've got me on this one. I feel really passionately about this one because obviously it's something that's personally happened to me as well. And message boards are that steps up another level on message boards. I don't go onto message boards for that reason, because I don't want to read these things about myself.
Do you know, it's something, as you said, you've experienced, and I can't say I've had that sort of experience so far. I think a lot of people that have been on and watched the podcast have generally been quite positive with their feedback. But I mean, I did have an experience probably earlier on in the season where I knew myself I was carrying a bit of extra weight, but Celtic got beat, and it was all over Rangers Twitter feeds. Pictures of me comparing me to I can't even remember some of the ones, but it was for me, I took it kind of on the chin. I went out, I hit the gym, and I tried to make myself better for it. But then you see things like that, and I can't imagine some of the stuff that you've received. That for me takes away. You want to interact with people. You want to have a good general discussion with people. we wouldn't be able to have had this podcast today if you'd received such level of abuse that you just completely closed everything down. Because I'd have never been able to reach out to you.
Yeah.
I'd have never been able to reach out to some of the people that I've had on the show. And we can't have this kind of interaction if that's not there. And that's what players want to do as well. They want to be able to go on after a game and say, 3 points in the bag, we've done well, on to the next one, and keep the fan spirits going, connect with the fans. But when you see, in the last 2 weeks, I've just took a list of everybody that's had abuse that I've seen. Jan Dander, Willian from Arsenal, Shane Duffy from Celtic, Eddie Nketiah from Arsenal, Anthony Martial, Marcus Rashford, Axel Tuanzebe, James McLean, Florian Kamberi. It's not as if it's the odd one here and there. Yeah, there's so much going on in the background, and it has to stop. Quite a few people coming in with their points on this. John Cregan saying, it's a lack of education, and JP coming in saying it's a lack of accountability.
I think it's a combination of both of them. It's a lack of education, and it is. But these people think, and for some reason, there's people in their head think, well, here's a footballer that's earning millions of pounds, so it's absolutely fine for me to say that to them. It's absolutely not. And you don't know, as I say, I've had abuse and I'm strong enough to take it. And now, more now, I think a few years ago it would maybe have got to me a little bit more, because I'd be like, well, why are you saying this? Why are you doing that? Whereas now it's like, do you know what, just ignore it. But these people that are being abused, how do you know how they're feeling? How do you know where they are mentally? That, really have a serious impact on somebody to get a torrent of abuse if they're not in a place that they can deal with that as well. And I think people need to understand that, it's not only words. It can really, really, cut deep. Yeah,
definitely. And Martin McCary coming in here saying they would never say to your face what they say online. And that's 100% true.
Yeah.
The Shane Duffy one, I actually saw that the follow-up to that, and the person just came out saying, I did it to get a reaction out of you. That's not even an apology. That's a pathetic excuse as to why people do that. And I know everyone's spending more time on social media because of what's happened. We can't get out. But what goes through your head when you're sending stuff like that? I get people that maybe, like, on a post, if Ryan Christie's hit a shot and it goes over the bar, you're terrible, you're this, you should be sacked, whatever.
Absolutely.
Right. That's criticism. You can understand that. But when it goes to the point of
personal stuff, yeah,
I want you dead, or you're a so-and-so, words we can't even repeat, that's crossed a line, and that's where action really needs to be taken.
Yeah, it's something that's getting so much worse, and I think, as you say, people are on social media more, and I think it probably is worse at the moment because people are maybe living their lives more through social media at the moment as well, because there's nothing else we can do. We can't go out, we can't see our friends, we can't do this, we can't do that. So people are frustrated, they can't go and watch their teams as well. But none of that makes it acceptable to abuse somebody online.
Yeah. I think I've seen a thing, and it's just backing up a point that Stevie Dock is making here. One person to get named and shamed in court, 2-week jail sentence, lose their job, it will soon stop. I did see a thing, and I think it was someone in Glasgow recently that was arrested for a tweet that they put out about Tom Moore, the recently departed Tom Moore.
Yeah.
That's just shows you that certain things are getting picked up on, but yet abuse like this, it's unacceptable. It can't be one rule for one and one rule for another. It has to be something straight across the board. Yeah.
I think there does need to be a harsher punishment for just people that you realise you can't just go about and say what you want, or it's just unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable. And the sooner people realise that, the better. You just can't abuse people just because of what they do.
Yeah. And just looking at some of the comments coming in, I'm just about to bring something up. It's someone that watches the show every week, Graham Aitken. Shane Duffy deserves no abuse. He's a Rangers fan. But joking aside, no one deserves abuse over social media banter, but yes, not personal abuse. That's the point. Michael Petit coming in saying, look at the abuse Lee Griffiths got after his mental health issues become public. It really doesn't help footballers. And you go, well, they're playing terrible. Maybe it's because the abuse that you're sending them. like, everybody is human.
Yeah.
Just like, if you want, think about when you're sending that message, what that would be like if you got that sent to yourself, and really think, do I want to be known? Because you're going to get caught. Just like that person that abused Shane Duffy, his name was, and his picture was all over social media within less than 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really want to be known as that person? And think before you send it.
I mean, we all said things heat of the moment before. Everybody has. You're a bit angry and you maybe say something heat of the moment, but not to that level. But you've got to hit send. Think about it. Read that back and go, is that an acceptable thing to say to somebody? Absolutely not. Just don't do it. It's as simple as that. Just don't do it. Banter's fine, but the line's been crossed too many times for folk.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect way to sort of wrap that up. And it has happened. We are there. We have hit 10,000 subscribers. A massive thank you to everyone who is watching. We are now on 10,000 subscribers on A State of Mind Media. And we have 15 different shows across the platforms. This evening we'll have the Salt and Sauce show hosted by David Simmons. At the weekend we'll have coverage of the Celtic game, pre-match, half-time and full-time. We also have Amy Canavan's new podcast, The Soccer Supernova, on Sunday. There's lots for you to get involved in, so do check out everything that is on A State of Mind Media. But, Alison, we now have to move on to the most important topic of today. It is yourself. We're going to take a look through your career and your upbringings. First of all, we've already mentioned it a couple of times, you are a Forfar fan. Where did that start out for you? Where did you first get involved in football? So
my dad is from Forfar. That's where he was born. That was where he's brought up before he moved to Cumbernauld as a teenager. So I've got a brother who's 18 months older than me. So he kind of was getting into football, and I moaned and moaned at my dad, I want to go to football, I want to go to football, I want to go to football. So my first game, I was 4 years old. I went to East Stirlingshire against Forfar at First Park. Forfar won. That was it. That was me.
And that was it? You were just...
We won. Forfar bad.
Immediately?
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to get back then? Was it like every week after that, or
I went,
was it just...
I went to a lot of games. We could go up to Forfar, go to, I mean, back then, you were going to see Clydebank, East Stirlingshire, as I say, at First Park, Stirling Albion, and getting to see all these brilliant teams like Gordon Duncan, obviously Super Scoreboard, who presents Super Scoreboard, we all know is a Motherwell fan. Forfar played Motherwell in the CIS Cup years ago.
Going back a bit there, aye.
Forfar won on penalties at Station Park midweek night. Discussions. I was at one side of Station Park and Gordon Duncan was at the other side of Station Park. Little did we know that years later we'd end up working together. So one of us likes to tell that story a little bit more than the other one.
It's definitely Gordon, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We're overjoyed about going to Forfar to get beaten in the CIS Cup.
So just a question coming in here. I'm just going through the questions that have came in. One from Paul McLean. So this will probably start where we're at this point in your story. Who was your all-time favourite footballer? Obviously growing up as well, and what it is now.
Growing up, it's hard because obviously I'd pick. There's so many Forfar players that I'd pick because I watched them play. You had like Stuart Kennedy, Craig Brewster, Paul Tosh, Paul Shields. For Forfar, they were all absolutely brilliant players. But growing up, I mean, you watch the likes of Maradona. You can't see past that watching World Cups and stuff, and just what a talent he was. One of the best players I've probably seen playing was Iniesta. He's absolutely amazing. Don't get me wrong, Messi's phenomenal, and seeing him play as well, but I think Iniesta particularly, I think he's not underrated, but a little bit kind of flew under the radar a little bit because he was in that team with Messi, but Iniesta for me, really, yeah.
So then it goes from being a fan to then starting to look to get into journalism. When did you know at that point, this is a period I want to get in, this is a place I want to get into, I'm going to go into journalism and I'm going to go into sporting journalism? When did that first come about?
Probably when I was at university, it really kind of started. I went on a 6-week placement when I was at university to a radio station in Falkirk, Central FM, working the news team, and I started doing... They had a football show on a Friday night that covered kind of Falkirk, East Stirlingshire, Alloa, Stirling Albion, Stenhousemuir.
All the big teams.
All the big teams. So I started doing that, and I would go out during the week, usually a Thursday night when it was training, and interviewing managers. So it was like Jimmy Bone, Terry Christie, Raymond Montgomery, Alan Moore when he came in eventually at Stirling Albion. So I started doing that. I then got a job at West Sound down in Ayrshire. So again, it was covering Ayr United, Stranraer, Kilmarnock as well. And when I started doing games, I covered Stranraer. And I covered them every week, almost for 3 seasons.
Was that the period that Kev Kyle was there?
It was the Neil Watt era when they went third division and they went right up. So I covered the seasons where they were basically going up the leagues, and I did the hard graft. I went down to Stranraer every second week. I went up to Dingwall to Ross County, did Ross County Stranraer. So I put the graft in, and I think it was something I really, really wanted to do. And I thought, well, if that's the way I've got to start, then that's the way I'll go. And then I went to Clyde and did my first Super Scoreboard game, and it was Dundee versus Partick Thistle. That was my first game.
Massive match.
First game for Super Scoreboard. I remember it. I remember doing my half-time report. My heart was like that. Oh my God, it was Super Scoreboard. And it was just such a buzz to do it. And did that. And then I went to the BBC for a little while doing news and did a bit of sport there as well, and just kept plugging away. I went back to Clyde 10 years ago. I went back to Clyde 10 years ago this year. And the rest is history. Now sports editor at Radio Clyde, getting to cover European games as well as Scotland games, Premiership games. I'm lucky. I'm very, very lucky. I know I am, and I love it. I love it.
That's all you want in life. You just want to enjoy the job that you're doing. But you mentioned you've been to Clyde twice now. What is it about Clyde that made you want to go back there?
I grew up with Super Scoreboard. I grew up listening to it. You had it on in your kitchen on a Saturday. You were sitting eating your dinner and you're listening to the caller phone in after the match. My dad used to phone Super Scoreboard after the game as well. And it's iconic when it comes to Scottish football. And if you cover Scottish football and it's radio that you do, you think, well, where do you want to go? And it's Super Scoreboard, and it's just, that is Scottish football to me. And it's been around for so many years. It just shows the absolute success of it and how the show's evolved over the years as things change. And our listener figures show that we're getting it right. Yeah,
and we're going to come back to Super Scoreboard in a minute, but there's just a couple of questions that came in before that, and I'll just bring them up on the screen here. One from Philip, and I'll just make sure I get this right. Philip 17 HG Smith, got it. What is Alison's favourite stadium in Scotland?
See, there's different ones for different reasons. Station Park, because it's your proper old school football ground. You've still got the terrace and you can walk the whole way around it. It's old school. I love Easter Road because the view from the press box is amazing. So you've got to climb all the way up to the top of the stand, but you're on the halfway line. And I like when you're watching a game looking down because you can see the play properly. So probably for covering the game, I'd have to say Easter Road for where you sit, and it's just a great view of the pitch, and absolutely love it. But Station Park for the old school vibe.
I'm going to do this one. Mr. Briggs says, has the tongue-twisting scoreline of East 5-5 4 ever actually happened? I feel like I've seen a clip on BBC Scoreline teleprompter showing it and the voiceover guy trying to say it.
It was the other way around, 4-1. It was 4-5 East 5-4. And it happened. It was
he actually comes in and says that,
1960s. It has happened.
Now when the chance comes back, I hope that's the actual scoreline, and I hope you're actually covering that game on Super Scoreboard.
I'll be there.
But going back to Super Scoreboard, and it's a question I was actually going to ask, but John Douglas has brought it up. Could you ask Alison who her favourite co-com is when doing featured matches on Super Scoreboard?
don't want to offend anybody here, because they all have different things. But Jim Duffy, I love doing a game with Jim Duffy. His analysis of a game and what he sees, because he's a manager and he's been in the game so long, he'll point something out to me and I'll go, oh, I never even thought of that. Just, he's so tactically aware, and just the difference of what he sees to maybe what I see as a journalist. And I've learned a lot from him, just in terms of the way he watches a game. And I really enjoy, for his tactical analysis, Jim Duffy's brilliant to do a game with.
What about Gordon DL? Now, we've mentioned Gordon DL before, and during the first lockdown, there was on Super Scoreboard the lockdown quiz, and it was himself and Mark Wilson. And I watched the most recent one that they brought back, and it wasn't until the end of the quiz that Mark Wilson found out that Gordon DL got all the answers for round one and still lost the quiz. So, I mean, what is Gordon DL like to work alongside? I mean, he just seems like one of those guys you want to go for a pint with.
He's one of the most unique individuals I know. You can't... The amount of things that happen to him that just wouldn't happen to anybody else. He just seems to get himself into situations. He's always got a story to tell. I can tell you he's the worst person I know for remembering somebody's name. Honestly, I've met this person the day before and you'll meet them again the next day and have no clue who they are. And it's not even as if he's not even doing it to be rude. He just is terrible with names. So if you're with him and you meet somebody, you've got to say, oh, hi, Michael, it's nice to see you today. So then he knows exactly who you're talking to. But he's just... Nothing he does surprises me anymore. I don't know if you saw I put a picture up on Twitter, the last game I did with him. He turned up a cheese board. A full cheese board, jar of chutney, whole lot. Like,
he's a complete character.
We went up to dinner
as well.
What's that, sorry?
I think you're going to mention this here. Is this the one where he had the blanket as if he was like the old... what's the name of the TV inspector? With the Ironside, with a blanket?
Yep, get blanket, his big hat, got that. Went up to Dingwall as well, and he actually came out with a big home doll, and I was like, where are you going? And he opened it and it was full of food, and I was like, where do you think we're going? Oh, we're out for the whole day. It's sandwiches, crisps, flat, the whole lot, honestly. He's great. He's just, they've all got different personalities, and when you bring them all together, it's absolutely brilliant.
At least you know he'll not see this, because he's not so savvy on the old social media, so he'll probably not see this. But yeah. Sorry,
everything I've said I'd say to his face, so it's all right.
Gordon Dale's a complete character. Somebody I'd love to speak to, and I'd like to hear his side of the story from everything that you've just said as well. That would be quite funny. Fantastic career, and obviously in journalism as well. Now, I know, obviously, you have the Celtic press conference coming up at 12:30, I think. So we will be running out of time very shortly. But just a couple of final questions before we wrap up today. First of all, as a female in journalism, there isn't that many sort of role models that you could kind of reach out to when you're coming through. Was that difficult for you kind of making your way through? Because we've now got a lot of, especially on the team here, we've got female journalists that are trying to make their way into the media. So what was that journey like?
I think, I don't want to say fortunate, but I don't think I found it any more difficult. I never saw it as me wanting to be a female covering football. I didn't want to be seen as that. I want to be a football journalist. I want to report on football. And for me, and maybe it was my mindset, I was never like, well, I'm a woman, it's going to be harder. I was just, this is what I want to do. And I was always, if I get the job, it's because I'm the best person for the job, not because I'm a woman. And I'm very much, I don't want to be treated any differently. And I never have wanted to be treated any differently. My mindset is, if you go to do a job, I want to do it in the same way that anybody else would do it. And that's always been my approach. And I think I've been quite fortunate in my career, because I mean, we've heard stories of what's happened to some females covering football and whatever, I've been really fortunate, and I've never really been treated any differently. I've not really had many incidents that I've thought that's completely unacceptable to say that to me or to do that to me. And so, yeah, for me, it's actually just been pretty straightforward, and just I want to be treated exactly the same as anybody else, essentially.
And just kind of finishing up on that then, so what advice would you give to, I mean, there's a lot of young journalists that are coming through. In fact, one I was just actually mentioning earlier, Amy Canavan, coming in saying that's the difference, not wanting to be a female sports journalist, just wanting to be treated and viewed the same. We've got Amy, we've got Lewis Laird, who watches quite regularly from the Cynic. These guys are looking to make a career in journalism going forward. What advice would you give these youngsters that are looking to do, like, have the career that you've had?
Believe in yourself, believe you're the best person to do it, push yourself out there. I mean, what I said earlier about starting doing your Stirling Albions, your Stenhouse Muirs, your Stranraers and whatever, is a great way to cut your teeth. Like, yes, we all want to go in at the top, we all want to start with the big teams, but actually starting there and cutting your teeth and building relationships there will help you going forward as well, and it kind of lets you get that experience of covering the games. And actually, when you do the lower league games, you do get a lot more access than you do covering your Celtics, your Rangers, your Premiership club. So it's a good way to start. I would say definitely your local club, try and get in there, do your interviews with them as well, and get as much access as you can. Be loud as well, get in touch with radio stations, newspapers, try and get your work experience as well. And if you do get work experience, make yourself heard. Too often you'll get somebody coming in work experience and they'll be a little quiet mouse in the corner, scared to say anything. It's not going to get you anywhere. You have to come in believing that you're there for a reason and you've got something to give to a company, and you'll stand out and we'll remember you, and you want to be remembered.
Yeah, and I mean, Alison, you've had a fantastic career, and there's still so much more to come. And I'm sure everyone that is watching has really enjoyed hearing your story today and hearing your points on some of the week's biggest talking points in world football. Where can we see you after this? Are you covering a game for Super Scoreboard this weekend?
Yes, I'm at Celtic Aberdeen tomorrow.
And how do you think that one will go?
It's a difficult one. John Kennedy obviously in charge of Celtic. I think there will be a little bit of a reaction there. It's a long time since Aberdeen won at Celtic Park. They obviously were there a couple of weeks ago and they managed to get their win last week. So I think there'll be a bit more belief in the Aberdeen squad as well. But I do think that Celtic will get a victory tomorrow. A bit of a reaction to Neil Lennon leaving and the change coming in, because I think as well the players know that they're trying to impress somebody that'll be coming through that door in the not too distant future as well.
And without giving too much away, you can tell me off air who's going to be the new Celtic manager. But Tommy Hamilton coming in saying, fair enjoyed this today, and I've enjoyed having Alison on the show. It's actually been a good laugh. I've really enjoyed it. I mean,
I've enjoyed it. Thanks for coming on.
Almost an hour and 10 minutes, and it's completely flew by. We could have spoke for much, much longer, but I know you've obviously got a lot of commitments with Clyde today. So where can people find you on social media? Not to give you any abuse, just to tell you how much they enjoyed hearing from you today.
You'll get me on Twitter. It's at Alison G. Conroy. So you'll get me on Twitter there.
That's brilliant. And next week, I actually will have the host of the Soccer Supernova podcast on here, Amy Canavan, on, telling about her story coming through, and we'll discuss all of the week's talking points. That will be back on Wednesday at 11 o'clock, back to the regular time. But Alison, thank you very much for joining me today. After this, tune in to A Celtic State of Mind, where Laura Bradburn will be hosting, and we'll have Jim Orr and Anthony Haggerty. But until next time, to everyone, please stay safe, and we will see you next week.